The tawbah is easy in that perspective. But why is it difficult? Because it's a struggle. It's not a one-time thing. إن الله يحب التوابين ويحب المتطهرين. Tawabin, this is mubalagha. This is an exaggeration. Those who keep making tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that mean? It means there is a reason why they have to make tawbah after tawbah after tawbah. It's because they falter. And sometimes they go back to their old ways, right? But this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew, that this is our nature, right? كل ابن آدم خطاء وخير الخطائين التوابون. So those who keep repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the best of those who commit sins, and we're all sinners. It follows that this struggle to make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know that this is normal. This is your life as a human being, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep opening the doors for you. In one Qudsi divine narration, that a man committed a sin and he said, "Oh Allah, I have erred, I made a sin, please forgive me." So Allah forgave him. And then he made that same sin again. And he said, "Oh Allah, please forgive me." And Allah forgave him. And then he went back again to the same sin. He said, "Oh Allah, forgive me." Allah forgave him, and Allah made the angels witness that this man can do whatever he wants now, I will forgive him. Why is that? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that this is his nature or her nature. That whenever they commit a sin, they always go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the condition to be accepted. Not that you plan your sin willingly. Not that you have an agenda. Okay, today inshallah Jum'ah, after Jum'ah, Saturday night we go party, Saturday night. No, it's not like that. It's someone who made a sin, they made a mistake, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps the door open for them as long as they keep coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the first thing that we have to know. It's an obligation and it's easy. And the struggle comes later after that. I'll talk about that inshallah in a minute. Bismillah ta'ala. Now the second element that we have talked about tawbah from a psychological standpoint, which is really important, is that tawbah taps into the relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a certain kind of preaching in the ummah. There's a certain kind of religious rhetoric, a certain kind of religious talk that goes around that makes the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a bit edgy, a bit difficult. And you can hear that with a lot of preaching, a lot of preachers, they have this edgy understanding of the relationship that someone has with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is very famous and very common. I'll give you an example. There's a very famous 2 lines of poetry that talk about people who sin and pretend that they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تعصي الإله وتدعي حبه ذاك لعمري في القياس شنيع لو كان حبك صادقا لأطعته إن المحب لمن يحب مطيع. So you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you pretend that you love Him. That's what it says. تعصي, you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you pretend that you love Him. This is very fallacious in the logic of matters. This is a fallacy. If you truly loved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because those who love others obey them. Now, you can see that there's a good intention behind these 2 lines of poetry, right? But the implication is that you are lying. If you really love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and disobey Him, there's something wrong with you. When the true nature of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like that. It's not like that. You want to reflect on that meaning, you can look at the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِي الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. What is the verse saying? The verse is saying, "Oh my servants, يَا عِبَادِيَ, my servants, who have constantly wronged themselves." أَسْرَفُوا مِنَ الْإِسْرَافِ. It's not like they made a sin. They constantly wrong themselves. They're indulged in wrongful deeds. Allah calls them Ya Ibadi, my servants. So He owned them, tabaraka wa ta'ala. He still said, you are my servants. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ابتدأ بالإحسان. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to these people, wants them to come closer to Him, tabaraka wa ta'ala. He did not alienate them outside the box, saying, you're not Muslim, you're lying, you're disobeying me, like the lines of poetry said. Allah says, always come back to me, you are my servants. even if you've indulged in sin, you are still my servant as long as they have the iman. لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. Always have hope in the mercy of Allah تبارك وتعالى. This is really important because some mashayikh, some scholars, some preachers make it seem that the only connection that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is how much deeds you do. And in the Quran, Surah Al-Buruj, وَهُوَ الْغَفُورُ الْوَدُودُ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafoor, He's all forgiving for those who are sinful. And Wadud reaches out with love tabarak wa ta'ala for those who are approaching Him with good deeds tabarak wa ta'ala. So never should we imagine that if we are short in our deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this is kicking me out of the box. Or this is just throwing me out of this realm of mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not, we're not saying that, oh, you shouldn't pray, or you shouldn't fast, you shouldn't go to Hajj. We have to be clear about that. It's not black and white. We're saying that you have to do the good deeds. The more good deeds you have, the more you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the right intention. However, if you fall short, don't say, I am out. This is another important thing. Now, if we want to talk about the Tawbah from a psychological standpoint, what are the processes that we as Muslims, we as human beings, we have to implement to make Tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? From a psychological standpoint, Tawbah is a process of change. You are trying to change yourself to a more desirable religious position. And that process of change, you want to change yourself to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The process of change was studied by psychologists. And there are some universal themes, there are some important themes that govern the processes of change. So for you to change, there are things that are ubiquitous, that all people, whatever you plan to change, whatever change you want to implement in your life, you will involve these psychological processes. You will do these things, whether you know it or not, to change yourself. Take the example of somebody who smokes cigarettes, or shisha, whatever people smoke these days. Whatever kind of shisha, whether it's ma'asid, whatever flavor you do, shisha is haram, smoking cigarettes is haram, it's bad for your lungs, it's bad for everyone, right? So if you want to try to quit that, okay? And I've talked to a lot of brothers who smoke shisha. You know what shisha is, right? How about the bubble, right? So one of my friends actually who smoked a lot of shisha, was a friend who taught me how to pray. But he didn't think it was haram. And he was very artistic in his shisha. He'd take the water out and put Pepsi Cola instead of the water, and then put a lemon on the top. He's just he loved his shisha. So it was terrible. So he was never convinced that shisha was haram. So how do you convince someone to quit shisha? If you want to convince them, oh, this is haram, you should stop it. So the first thing is you want to ask these people, are these people ready to change? Are these people willing to change? So these are the two main themes that I will harp on till the end of this halaqah today. Are you ready to change? Readiness to change. Are you willing to change? And these are two separate things, as I will talk about inshallah. So the first part that you have to know is that person, where is that person in the process? Ready and willing, ready but not willing, willing but not ready, what's going on with that person? What does willing to change mean? What is that word willing? I am willing to change. Willing to change means that that person is convinced about the importance of change. That person understands that there's a discrepancy between where this person is right now and where they would like to be in the future. So that discrepancy is the thing that drives the willingness to change. Let me say that in Arabic or English, okay? Because what's Chinese learn. So if I want to stop smoking shisha, am I willing? Yes, I'm willing. What does that mean? It means that I know it's harmful. I know it's haram. I know it's hurting me. I know I'm burning my money. And I want to save money. That's not what I want to be. I want to be somewhere else. I want to be in better health. I want to be more financially capable. So what do? I am willing to change. Why is that? Because I understand that there's a discrepancy between where I am right now and where I'd like to be in the future. Does that make sense? So this is understandable. So that's willingness to change. I am willing to change. Same goes for everything else. Pornography, gambling, lottery, alcohol, anything that you talk about in the realm of sinful behavior in Islam, this is where you have to start. Is that person willing to change? Am I willing to change? Do I understand that this is not where I want to be? I want to be somewhere else. There's a discrepancy between where I'd like to be and where I'm right now. That's what the willingness to change is. Now, am I ready to change? What does that mean? It means that it's not just knowing something. It's not being convinced about something. Being ready to change is having the inner capacity to change. Having the psychological resources to change. Being powerful enough to change. So I'll go back to the shisha example. So this friend of mine had his own clique, his own crew, right? And they all were shisha smokers. That sounds very terrible, shisha smokers. I mean, they did other things in life, but they smoked a lot of shisha, right? So he was willing to change. He wanted to change, he knew it was bad, everything. But at the same time, he was not ready to change. Why is that? Because he felt that he would be abandoned by his friends. He felt there was a lot of peer pressure going on. He would be lonely if he decided not to smoke shisha anymore. Why is that? Because that's how the guys did it. They went out, at night, nothing bad, just smoking shisha and talking about other stuff. So that part made him not so much ready to change. Why is that? Because deep inside, he felt that he was not strong enough to make that change. Now that applies to all kinds of other things that you can think about when you want to try to change. Is that person willing to change? And is that person ready to change? So I'm going to stop for a second and ask folks, can you explain to me what does that word mean, willing to change? Who can raise their hands and tell me what does that mean? Willing to change. Is there anybody willing to tell me what's the difference between the two?
He has the conviction, but he's not ready to make that.
Oh, he can have both. But just the word willing, what does that mean? The word willing to change, what does that mean? Per se, what does that mean, willing? It means that there's a discrepancy between where they like to be and where they are right now. And so they have the conviction, they have the understanding, oh, I have to do something about that. But what about ready to change? What does that mean? Ready to change, what does that mean?
It's ready to try.
Maybe. But what does it mean more specifically? Say again. He has the capability to change. He has the energy. He has the inner strength to do something, to change. For example, he has the energy to fight peer pressure. He's willing to say, I'm going to be the last man standing, but I'm going to be standing. I don't care, They'll say whatever they say, I'm going to do this, right? So you have to be ready to change. You have to be having the inner resources from the inside to change. That's what ready means when you say I'm ready to change. Now, what people look at for these two items, ready and willing, if someone is not ready nor willing, so shisha is not haram and I'm happy with my life, all right? And you can go talk to the people in the masjid, I'm not ready for you right now. So psychologists call that the pre-contemplation stage. People who are in the pre-contemplation stage, they're not even thinking about change in the first place, right? And this is a person who is clueless, who has no clue, and who's not ready to entertain the idea that maybe I have to change. He has no doubt with his conviction that shisha is cool, right? Or that whatever I'm doing is okay. I'm not picking people who smoke shisha here. I'm sorry if you smoke shisha, I'm not picking on you. It's just an example that came to mind because of my friend, that's all. Say again? Addiction, whatever addiction we're talking about, nicotine or whatever kinds of addiction we're talking about. So addiction is another thing that we can talk about as well. So people call that the pre-contemplation stage. It means that this person is not ready to entertain the idea that, I have to change. And the Quran addresses those kinds of people. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about al-khamr, Allah talks about alcohol in the Quran, Allah addressed the Arabs before khamra in the first place was clearly, straight out made haram from the first day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was questioning, was raising the doubt for the Arabs, فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس وإثمهما أكبر من نفعهما. So what does the Quran do here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises a doubt for people who are not ready and not willing to change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised the doubt. And that's what you do with someone who is not even contemplating to change. You raise the doubt. You say, okay, you want to do this, okay, but have you considered this or that, for example? Have you considered, for example, the financial situation? Have you considered your lungs? Have you considered, that you're displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Have you considered this or this or that? So you raise the doubt. But you raise doubt compassionately, okay? You don't tell him, you're going to go to hell, okay? That's bad, that's really bad. Don't do that. So this is how you raise the doubt. The Quran raised the doubt for these people. So if someone actually lets the doubt in to their minds, to their hearts, if they allow the doubt to go in, you have created a crack, a small crack, okay? A small crack to make that discrepancy happen. A small crack that you want to keep digging in until you make a bigger discrepancy between where they are right now and where they like to be in the future. So that if the doubt goes in, you're making a small crack, and that's where you have to capitalize on. Once the crack starts getting bigger, that's when you call that the contemplation stage. That's when that person starts thinking, oh, maybe I have to change. Maybe porn is not healthy for my body or for my psyche. Maybe smoking shisha is destroying my lungs. Maybe I'm paying all my money. Maybe I'm not paying attention to my kids. Maybe this, maybe that. So if they start saying the maybes, this means that they're contemplating change. And that's a great thing, to contemplate the change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also uses that with the example of alcohol in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asks people not to come to the point where they're intoxicated. So Allah is putting more in that doubt region and making more discrepancy. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eventually tells those people that you should abstain completely from alcohol. This is something bad, stop doing it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Muslims to stop using alcohol, to stop drinking. So when someone has the contemplation going on, you keep working on the readiness to change. So someone is willing, it means that they have the conviction, the doubt seeped in, there's a crack, you want to make the crack bigger, you want to make a discrepancy now. How do you make that? You make them ready for change now. Now you have to say, you can do it. And you don't just say it by mouth and just get flags and cheerlead them. You don't want to do that. You have to also supply them with the potential, the capacity to change. You have to say, okay, you're feeling lonely now because you left your friends who do marijuana, and you don't want to smoke marijuana anymore. So maybe connect with the folks at the masjid. No, it's bad if the folks at the masjid are also smoking marijuana. That would be bad, because there are some youth groups around Boston. There are youth in the masjid who are doing pot. But you're hoping that there's a community where they feel safe and they're not smoking pot, right? And you would hope that by connecting with these folks, inshallah, they'll be more ready to change, and they have more capacity to change because they have more psychological willpower to change now. And now once they're ready to change, we said they're willing, and now they want to be ready to change now. And this is where you have an action plan for them. So that's the planning stage. How do you plan to change your life now? Now that you're ready to change, how do you plan to change your life? How do you plan not to go to these websites anymore? How do you plan to not hang out with these guys who smoke marijuana? How do you plan to, let us plan together. And that's where you plan things through so that they can have a strong base for their tawbah. After the planning stage, this is where comes, the action. Needless to say, you want to act on these plans that you've had, and then you have to reinforce the tawbah that someone has. Now, these 5 stages, they are, like I said, these are known psychological processes. The pre-contemplation stage, the contemplation stage, the planning, the action stages. These are all stages of change that we can all apply to the concept of tawbah. Why is that? Because tawbah is a process of change per se that is within a religious context, so to speak. The last stage in the stages of change is what if someone relapses? Someone goes back to their old ways. They put all the energy, they're willing, they're ready, they plan, they act on their plan, they're doing well, and suddenly they relapse. This guy, hits them up, say, hey, what are you doing, man, on the weekend? I don't know, I'm staying home. Playing video games, going to the mosque, there's a Qiyyam at the masjid. Hey, what about watching a movie? Huh? What about a movie, huh? You haven't watched a movie in a long time. What do you say? Wallahi, I don't know. Wallahi, maybe I should go to the halaqah. man, you're always going to the halaqah, bro. The message is not going to evaporate, you know. Let's go watch a movie. Now this person inside feels something, you know, is just, you know, tingling inside. He feels that, I know where this is going. I kind of know where this is going. It's not just like just being movie. We're going to smoke after this. We're going to get high. Bro, that's not good, man. So what do you do now when that happens? So this is where that person depends on how well seasoned their tawbah, depending on how much they're psychologically savvy, but their personal inner tricks that their own psyche has, depending on how, you know, they've been trained to target their own inner demons, that's where they can resist this relapse. However, relapses do happen. People go back to their old ways a lot of times. So as a mentor, or as a community, or as a person, if I relapse, I have to learn to forgive myself and go back to my action, to my plan, to my contemplation again. And do the work again and go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is that? Because the doors are open. And why is that? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you every time you come back to Him with the proper intentions. And why is that? Because this is our nature as human beings. We fall short, we are weak many times. So it's important after we talk about all these stages that we stage ourselves. Because this is about us, about every one of us. So I know that you're thinking about Khalil and Khairi and Salwa, but let's think about ourselves now. Where am I on those stages of change? What is it that I want to change about myself? Let us specify one behavior, one deed, one area I'm trying to change about myself. Where am I? Am I contemplating? Am I pre-contemplating? Am I putting the action? Am I putting a plan? Where am I on the map? And that's where we have to think about ourselves, and we have to place ourselves on the map somewhere so we can start working on this process of change, inshallah ta'ala. Now, what are some of the pet peeves? What are some of the problems with this process? And what are some of the mistakes that people make when they want to make people make tawbah? One of the bigger problems is, if you push too hard, sometimes you might break the system. What does that mean? Let's say that someone is willing to change. It means that, I know that I have to change. I know I have to quit smoking marijuana. It's bad for me, bad for my health. It's a lot of money. I'm paying a lot. I don't want to do this anymore. Willing to change. But this person does not have the readiness to change. They're weak from the inside. They're weak from the inside. They have no plan. Nobody is giving them the strength. There is no peer support group. There is no youth group they can hang out with. They have no friends. They don't have the capacity to change. They come to the masjid, and the khatib is talking about drugs. And this guy is willing. The discrepancy is huge, right? But they're weak from the inside. So the shaykh says, all the addiction problems you have in the community, Allah is watching you, what thing you're doing to yourself, you're harming yourself, your family, you're a disgrace to the community, hashash, whatever they start telling people. This guy already has a huge discrepancy. So this is where guilt will start now accumulating. And this is where that person might break at one point, because nobody is talking about how can I become more ready to change. I'm willing. I'm suffering, and you make the gap bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're pushing me down and down and down further, and I have no means to change. Can someone talk here about the means of change, please? Because I want to change, but all you keep talking about is how bad I am as a person. So this is where our preaching kicks in, and this is where our preaching has to be nuanced enough to address the different spectrum of people I have in my audience. And this is where I have to be very delicate and very wise in how I approach people's mischief, people's sinful behavior. I have to be very gentle. Why is that? Because in the audience there might be someone who wants to change, they're dying to change, but they have no means to change. So this is where the preaching should talk about how do we change, not just how important change is. I'm a psychiatrist, so I've seen a lot of things in my life, in my clinic and outside my clinic. But I knew a person who struggled with homosexual urges. And that person, instead of seeing a therapist, psychiatrist, he was hanging around the mashayikh, and the scholars, and the good brothers, quote-unquote good brothers, the knowledgeable brothers. And he was asking them, questions about how he's feeling. And they're all saying, oh, astaghfirullah, it's haram. it's really bad, bro. What you're doing is, it's terrible. It's terrible. Look what happened to the Qawm of Lut. Look how Allah destroyed them. From the seventh, sky to the seventh floor, earth. Allah destroyed them. And so fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's like, I fear Allah. I know it's a problem, but like, help me do something about that. But all he was hearing is that it's terrible, it's bad, it's terrible, it's bad, it's terrible, it's bad. And all the advice was getting, make istighfar, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this guy ended up actually attempting to commit suicide. Alhamdulillah, he's alive, alhamdulillah, alive and kicking, very much alive and kicking, alhamdulillah. But why is that? Because he got the wrong advice. He knew it was haram, he knew it was bad, but nobody was showing the way, how do I change? Teach me a skill to change. This is where the preaching should take a different turn. Our preaching is very theoretical. We get stories from the Sahaba and the righteous Salaf, and we load our preachers with a lot of stories that don't relate to our daily lives. They're important stories. We have to learn these stories. We have to learn from these stories. But help me apply those beautiful stories in my life. Teach me skills. Teach me tangible, practical things I can do to change. Don't project the past on me. Don't expect me to be like the Salaf or like the Sahaba. We always say, let's be like the Sahaba. How can I be like the Sahaba? A lot of people think that Islam came and changed the Sahaba all of a sudden. Some people think, Islam came and these ignorant, savage people suddenly became the most beautiful generation. For a lot of people, it was like that. But many of the Sahaba were noble people who actually only just wanted Islam to show them as beautiful gems. And the Prophet ﷺ says that. He says, خِيَارُكُمْ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ خِيَارُكُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ إِذَا فَقُهُ. So the best of you in the time of Jahiliyyah are the best of you in the time of Islam if they have the knowledge. So not all Sahaba were like that. Some Sahaba were noble men and women, and they just needed Islam to show them up as beautiful models in history. So when we say stories from the Sahaba, let us bring practical examples that we can teach the youth and we can teach ourselves so we can apply these concepts in a very tangible and practical way. So I'll try to sum up inshallah, and then we can open the floor for questions after that. When we talk about Tawbah, we are talking about a process of change, a psychological process of change. This process happens to be in a religious context, and this is why there is utility, there is help to use the psychological themes when we understand the process of Tawbah. And also, it's important to understand Tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a never-ending process. It's an obligation. And that we have to keep doing that and keep coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if it was the same sin, we have to do it again and again, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ التَّوَّابِينَ وَيُحِبُّ الْمُتَطَهِّرِينَ. It also is important to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts with ihsan and loves people, His ibad, His servants, even if they were immersed and submerged in their sins. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls them my servants. قُلْ يَا عِبَادِ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. O my servants, those who have submerged themselves in sin, Allah still calls them ibadi, His servants, tabarak wa ta'ala. So the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not only contingent on whether you pray or not, whether you come to masjid or not. This is important, and that increases the importance of the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you being a Muslim, never despair, always come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now when we try to guide people, or guide ourselves to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make tawbah, it's important that we realize there's a process of change. It does not have to be linear. You don't have to start, okay, I'm going to start with pre-contemplation, then contemplation, but it doesn't have to work that way. Many people in the past, in our history, have repented, they jumped all the way. From pre-contemplation to action, and they became saints after that. Right? Famous story, I think it's Al-Fudayl, I think. Al-Fudayl was once, climbing stairs to see his girlfriend. And he was, I think she lived on the third floor, and he was just climbing up. And on the second floor, someone was reciting the Quran. I think the verses were أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم آمن الذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله. So is it not time for those who are believers to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so their hearts to go back with khushu' to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And he listened to the verse, and then he reflected, and then it hit him. He internalized that verse. Oh my God, What am I doing? So he wasn't even thinking about change. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought him the guidance through this verse that he heard, and he, after that, he jumped, literally jumped from wanting to see his girlfriend, and jumped from wanting to commit a sin to repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and becoming a saint. On the way back, actually used to be a robber, he used to be a thief. He would cut people's on the road and he'd take people's money and everything. So on the way, there were Muslims who are trying to camp in an area. And he just passing by, he heard them say, don't camp here. This is the headquarters for Kuwait. He'll rob you. Don't camp here. Say that? Man, no, had the vision. That's a different story. I think it's the same verse, but it's a different story. So he was camped. They were camping, and he goes, "Subhanallah, I have a reputation now that I scare Muslims. What a reputation I have! It's terrible." And then he repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he became, of course, it takes training to become a saint. But that was the start. That was where he started, the process. So you don't have to go in linear fashion. You don't have to say, I can't start, praying before I think about the prayer. You can start praying today, right? But it's important to map yourself, to see where you are on the map today. So the stages we talked about are pre-contemplation, and we said that's when someone is not thinking about change in the first place. And how do you change that? You raise a doubt. You make a crack in the wall, and you try to increase the discrepancy between where you are right now and where you'd like to be in the future. Then you have the contemplation stage, and that's where you are doubting, maybe I should change. And that's when you increase what we call the self-capacity. You become more capable to change. You become more powerful. You connect with the community. You ask for resources. You read a book. You ask for help. You look for peer support. And that's what strengthens this contemplation. And then after that, you become ready to change, and that's where you have a plan to change. And you act on the plan in the action stage, and you try to prevent yourself from relapsing. Again, going back to your old ways. So that was, in a nutshell, what I wanted to say today. Of course, the topic of Tawbah is a huge topic, and we all are struggling with that every single day. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us a steady Tawbah, inshallah ta'ala, and make us among the الذين استقاموا على طاعته وعلى نهج نبيه صلى الله عليه وسلم. And I can open the floor for questions now, inshallah.